from the All Indiana Podcast Network.
It's time for real conversation about the real issues that affect our communities.
Poverty, education, equality, and more.
This is Real Talk.
Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Welcome to Real Talk on the All Indiana Podcast Network. I'm Reverend Charles Harrison, and on this episode, I will be talking to Darryl Jones, one of the 10-point OGs. You have heard a lot about the OGs and who they are. Well, today I will interview one of those OGs that are out on the street helping to curb the pattern of violence in Indianapolis. Welcome back. This is Reverend Charles Harrison with Real Talk with Reverend Harrison. And I'm excited today. I have a very special guest today. A lot of people have been asking the question about the OGs. Who are the OGs? A lot of people don't know what the term OG means. When I do a lot of training and talking about 10-point, whether it be in Indianapolis or cities across the state of Indiana or nationally, some people wonder, well, who are the OGs and what do the OGs do? And certainly that's been a main part of what the Indianapolis 10-Point Coalition has done over the last since 2015. We've made an adjustment in what we have done, and we've put a greater emphasis on that, though we've had OGs working with us for 15 to 20 years. And certainly my guest today, Darryl Jones, who has been a part of 10-Point for about 15 years now, as one of the 10-Point OGs. Welcome, Darryl. How you doing?
I'm good. How about yourself, Pastor?
Well, I'm doing real good. Listen, tell us a little bit about yourself. For those people who are listening to the broadcast today, a little bit about your journey, and then we can talk a little bit about 10-Point and how you got connected to us.
Okay. Well, Pastor, thanks. Thanks for having me on the show, first of all. Well, for me, let me see, how can I start this off? I'm going to start this off with my childhood. I was raised by two parents, only child, so I pretty much got what I needed. I didn't get everything I wanted, but I got most of what I needed.
Right.
And I participated in sports. Pretty good little kid when I was coming up, pretty smart, pretty good little kid. I went to college for 1 year and got into a scuffle with some people and got sent home from school. And from that point, I kind of lost interest in trying to do the right thing,
Okay.
So, because I was like, everybody's against me,
Right.
It wasn't my fault that I got into the scuffle, so I'm blaming everybody else. I
Right.
was one of them blamers.
Right.
So I went to the streets. And going to the streets, I ended up getting hooked on drugs, went to prison 8 times. I know you probably say 8 times. How you go to prison 8 times? Well, I didn't do nothing but small, petty crimes. I didn't do robberies. Well, I did do some robberies. I'll take it back. But I wasn't. I called myself a player.
Right.
I was a con man. Is what I was called at the time. Then, like I said, I got hooked on drugs, so quite naturally everything went downhill. My life went to a total spin. So I got incarcerated one time in Columbus, Indiana. My daughter came to see me. This is what actually turned me around. My daughter came to see me. She said, only time I see you is when you're incarcerated, when you're locked up.
Wow.
Because when I was in the streets, I didn't want my family to see me like I was.
Right.
So I kind of shied away. Maybe Christmas or Thanksgiving or something I would come around. But just to be coming around on a regular basis, I wouldn't. Because I didn't want them to see the situation and the shape that I was in. Well, when she told me that, I went back to my cell, and I sat there, and my spirit hit me. And I cried, because I'm like, wow, because I had never even thought about that. I was so into myself that I didn't even think about that. So I cried, got on my knees and prayed, and my life has been turned around since. Now, don't get me wrong. It's been a battle, and it's still a battle. It's still a battle. But at the same time, my life changed. So when I went to prison behind that charge. I went to prison. I got to habitual criminal in the whole 9 yards. I went to prison. They charged me, let me say this, to brought me to God even more. I was in my cell. They charged me with a robbery, but I didn't do a robbery. I stole the money out of the safe, but I didn't use a gun or anything, or threaten the person or anything. But he said that because he didn't want his company to know that he left the safe unlocked.
Okay.
So they charged me with robbery. So while I'm down there, I'm in a town, and we all know that Columbus is predominantly white.
Right.
So I had a white attorney. He was saying that I needed to plead guilty to a theft, and they would drop the robbery. But I'm saying, nah, I ain't pleading guilty to no theft because that's all it was.
Right.
So you're not doing me a favor
right.
with me pleading guilty to a theft. So anyway, I got on my knees and I prayed. So the lawyer called my mom and my girlfriend and told him I was crazy because I was going to go to jury trial, which I did.
Right.
I was going to jury trial in a predominantly all-white city. You
right.
know, they're going to find you guilty, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
So I was like, well, I don't believe it, because I got down on my knees and prayed.
Right.
And I just didn't believe I'd get found guilty for a robbery because I didn't do a robbery.
Right.
Well, I went to jury trial. I didn't get found guilty for the robbery. They dropped the robbery, but I did get found guilty for the theft. Well, I did the theft, so I was okay with that. I got to habitual criminal for it. I went to prison. Did my time, got out. And as soon as I got out, I said, you know what, I can't do what I've been doing.
Right.
I got to find something different to do. Well, a close friend of mine was with 10 Point Coalition. Right. And he said, man, maybe you want to come and join us and, work with these kids and blah, the whole 9 yards. So I said, okay, I'll do that. So since then, I've been with 10 Point for 15 years.
Well, tell us a little bit about Darryl. What was the streets like compared to today? What were the streets like back then? When you were kind of out there, and what you're seeing today.
Well, when I was in the streets, there's always been killings.
Right.
There's always been killings. But when I was in the street was more for the people that were in the streets.
Okay.
We didn't, because you said something crazy to me or looked at me crazy or said something to my girlfriend or stepped on my shoe or something like that didn't constitute a killing.
Right.
The people that got killed when I was coming up, for the most part, were people that maybe robbed you or sold you some bad drugs or stole something from, something that they done to you.
Right.
We didn't go shoot their mother or their brother or their sister, you understand what I'm saying?
Right.
Not to say that I shot anybody because I don't want nobody coming up with nothing, but anyway, the difference was we had more respect. I think the fact that the way we were raised made a difference, because I was raised in a village.
Right.
I really was. Everybody, and I was raised in a village and I was raised in church. When I was a kid, I had to go to church every Sunday. Now, did I pay attention every Sunday? No, but I still heard the word.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think that's what, I don't even think that. I know that's what saved me.
Okay.
That's what got me back to God.
Right.
Because I already had experience with Him. I already knew about Jesus. So it was a helpful thing for me to get back and get out of the streets.
So the 8 times you were in and out of prison, how much time did you serve in and out of prison total?
Of my life?
Yes.
16 years.
16 years. So you served 16 years in prison. So about 15 years ago, you got connected with 10 Point. Kind of what was your impression of what 10 Point was doing at the time? Had you ever heard of 10 Point? Or was it just your friend kind of introduced you to it? And
yeah, he introduced me to it. I hadn't heard of it because, like I said, I had just got out of prison.
Right.
And I hadn't really heard about 10. I heard bits and pieces, but I hadn't heard much about 10 Point. But when he said working with the kids, I got excited because that's what I've always seemed to been good at. I've always been good at being able to talk to kids, and they listen to me. I don't, and I believe it's a gift that God gave me, so when he told me about it, I was like, yeah, sure, heck yeah, I want to do this, so I got into it, and the more I got into it, the more I wanted to do it.
Okay.
Because I could see the results, versus the fact that I might come in your store and steal your money out of your cash register. I don't know if I'm going to cause you to lose your job or whatever, so I was getting convicted, how can I say it, convicted of it.
Okay.
My spirit was convicting me of that,
Okay.
But when I helped a kid or got a kid into drug rehab, or I started coaching kids at Barnes United Methodist Church, at your church pastor. I started coaching kids, and I started seeing the change because when the parents would bring the kids, well, this kid's this, and he's doing that, and he's doing that. And once I started working with them, and here's another thing, people say, well, how do you work with them? I don't have a set pattern.
Right.
What I mean? Because everybody's an individual. Everybody's different. So what might work for this kid might not work for that kid.
Okay.
So what I would try to do is read the kid and see what it is that he really needed and try to provide that for him.
Right.
Provide the need that he needed and show some interest and some time in him. Because you can't just from my experience, I just couldn't sit down and tell a kid, you shouldn't be doing that. This is what you should be doing. You should be going to school. Well, some of them kids is in a household that nobody went to school.
Okay.
Nobody graduated from school. So schools don't mean nothing to them. I've even had a situation where I was coaching some kids, and there was a kid that come in, and he would be high off of weed. He wasn't nothing about 13 years old.
12 years old, huh?
Yeah, he'd be high
12,
off of weed.
13.
So I'm looking at him, and the first time I said, man, what's wrong with you? You smoking? No, I've been swimming, which, he tried to cover it up. But what really got me was, after I got through talking to, what I did was, this is what I did. I had another 10-point member, Eddie, play like he was a police officer.
Right.
You know what I mean? I had him come in and tell him, I'll lock you up, blah, blah, blah. If I find out you smoking weed again. We took him through all that. But what really got me was, as soon as we got through with all that, and he went back on the floor to practice, one of his friends came up and sat next to me and said, Coach, I just want to let you know that he smokes weed with his father.
Wow.
So, you saying something don't mean anything, because I know when I was a kid, my daddy was him. My daddy said it, that's what I went for. I mean, make no difference what you said, you know what I mean? So I'm like, but wow, so, we have kids out here smoking weed with their parents. We got kids out here where parents are introducing them to guns. They're introducing them to being gangs. They tell them somebody put your hands on you, you kill them, and these type of things. Versus when I was growing up, you got punished if you did something you didn't have no business doing. Or when my parents, they didn't smoke marijuana, but they drank. But I couldn't sit in a room with them and drink. Now kids are sitting in a room with their parents while they smoking weed. So yeah, they think it's nothing wrong with it, because their parents is doing it.
Because the parents do it. This is Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison, and my special guest today is Darryl Jones. He's one of the 10-point OGs. He works in the United Northwest area, around the 29th and MLK area. Has been there. He's shared his story. Spent almost 16 years in and out of prison, and has been with 10 Point for about 15 years. Darryl, one of the questions I want to ask, and you have shared a lot of the challenges today. How do you reach kids today who may have a lot of things going against them? I think most people think that all the kids who are out, who are doing the violence are just bad kids. That's the impression, and we know that that's really not true. It's the circumstances that a lot of kids in may lead them down the wrong path. So how do you reach kids today, and particularly when we're seeing so many young people, involved in criminal activity or with guns, or maybe selling drugs, or in gangs? Can they be reached? Because I think the question people are asking, can anything really be done about urban violence?
Well, I'm gonna give you my opinion. Pastor, you know this. I went to the juvenile center for a year and a half every Monday, and we talked to the kids. There was a kid in there, 10 years old, that was in there for carrying a gun. So my opinion is, Lord, as pastor, is that, some of these kids, like when they get around 16, 17, 15, 16, 17, 18, they may be starting a little bit younger than they did when I was coming up.
Okay.
They get what we called in the streets is seasoned.
Okay.
And once you get a kid that's seasoned,
so
because
for people listening, what does that mean?
That means a kid that's into this, what he's doing, and he feels like what he's doing is what he's gonna do.
Okay.
Because when I was coming up, you couldn't tell me not to go steal.
Right.
What I mean? Because I was getting money is what I thought.
Right.
You know what I mean? I ain't got to work for nobody. My mentality was bad.
Okay. Okay.
And these kids now, for them kids, it's going to be hard to get them out.
Okay.
My thought process is we need to start addressing the kids 10 years and younger.
Okay.
Because see, what I've learned is the kids that are out here doing the real bad stuff are brainwashed. I mean, to be honest with you, they're brainwashed.
Okay.
They done got with another older person that's doing wrong.
Right.
That's teaching them how to do wrong. That's how I learned how to do wrong from older people.
Okay.
And there's teaching them how to do wrong so they get seasoned. If we can catch the kids and do the same thing that they do to them, how they teach them how to do wrong and teach them how to do good, then I think we'll get better results.
So you said how much role does broken families play?
Plays a big role.
Yeah,
plays a big role.
Big role. Okay.
Like I said, because you got kids that never, they in a household, no one ever went to school.
Okay.
So they don't know anything about trying to go to school. They hear people talk about it, but they come home, their parents say, where's your homework? Okay. You know what I mean? Let me help you with your homework. They can't help it because they didn't go to school. You know, not to be putting anybody down or anything, but just speaking about the situation that some of these kids have to go through. Or you got a mom that's on the streets, running around, you know, doing whatever it is she's doing. She's not there half the time. I went in the gas station, it's been about a year or so ago, and there was a little kid in there. He had a little brother and a little sister with him, and it kind of made me angry a little bit.
Right.
And he was buying bread and pop and tater chips, and he got a little thing of bologna. But when he gets up to the line, he was about $1.25 short, and they didn't want to serve him. You know what I'm saying to myself? You're looking at this kid buying these food for these little kids.
Right.
What's $1.25? So I ended up, whatever he owes, I'll pay for it.
Right.
You know, but he was trying to feed his family.
Yeah, I did that one time. The kids was going to buy something, and they were short, and I said, listen, I'll pay for that. Because, you know what's going on.
What they're doing,
Yeah, that's true.
He didn't want to do it, not to be putting him down, but I'm saying you got a kid. He wasn't nothing but probably maybe 13 at the oldest, and he was feeding his little kids. I mean, his little brother and his little sister, because obviously the parents wasn't around to do it. You know, so that's a strike against them. They don't know about school if they don't know about school. You know what I'm saying? You know, broken homes have a whole lot to do with it. I was raised with both parents, and it made a difference.
It made a difference. So what about the absence of fathers, or when fathers are in a young person's life? You just shared a story where the father was smoking, weed with the son. Right. So that's what the son knew. Or fathers are influencing their sons if they're around to
and not all fathers.
Not all fathers. Okay.
There's some fathers out there that's doing that. What I think about the father situation, I don't know. I might make some people a little upset about this.
Okay.
But I'm gonna be real about it.
Okay.
I think it started back when we had the HUD thing going on,
right?
Where they were giving the females welfare,
right? Giving
them a place to stay. And not charging them a whole lot for rent, but the cost of that was couldn't no man be there.
Okay.
So to me that was a setup, because now all of a sudden there's no fathers around. They're either in prison or they're not taking care of their kids, like they say. This is what they're saying anyway. They're not taking care of their kids. Okay, this was back in the 80s when it was set up for the fact that they wasn't around then.
Right.
So the parents their parents wasn't able to be around their kids. So consequently, it was a domino effect. It just continued to go on, because they wouldn't let them. If they came to your house and you was on welfare and you had a man's shirt in there, they wanted to take them off welfare.
Right.
So I think it was staged, in my opinion.
So a typical night on the street. What do you see out there for people who, are listening to this podcast? What do you see? What happens? What has been some things that have happened out there that may have stuck with you? I know we have done a lot over the years, over the 15 years, but what normally happens when you are out there and other OGs are out there, both male and females, that you tend to encounter on the streets at night?
We got a little bit of everything, Pastor. We got some kids out there that's on the PCP or whatever it is they own. We got some kids out there. We got some kids out there that are hungry.
Okay.
They may be smoking a little marijuana. I think all of them do that, or pretty much. But they're not doing anything else. But they wanna look like the guy down the street that's got the big pretty car and the shoes and the girls that's chasing after them and all that kind of thing, because that's all they see.
Okay.
They didn't get no exposure. They don't get no, most of our urban kids, they don't get a tour to a college to see other black kids that are in college and can tell them their story and tell them how they got to college. They don't get to see all that. So the only exposure they getting is exposure they see in the street. They come out of the house, the yard next door got trash all in the lot. That's depressing.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? You're sitting there, you ain't got nothing to do if there's no gym or nothing for you to go to.
Right.
So you ain't got so all you can do is sit there and watch this guy down the street, people running in and out. He coming out, dressed all with the top fashions on, and he's riding with the car with the rims on it and all this kind of thing. So you say that's who you want to be, because that's all you see. That's all you know.
Wow.
That's all you know. So, and we see a lot of kids like that, and some of the kids, I mean, all kids are not really bad. Some of them are peer pressure. Some of them are just scared.
Right.
You know, by the way things are going now, they just scared. They shooting these guns now like it ain't nothing. So now some of these kids are scared, so they feel like they got to shoot first.
Right.
You know, almost makes me feel like it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right,
If a situation was to come up like that.
Well, you know, one of the things I'm seeing now, you know, God, there seems to be so many more young people and kids with guns now.
Like I told you,
10-year-old. Yeah. I mean, they seem to be getting younger and younger, and you're seeing the extended magazines. You can see that when the guns,
100 shots. And all this that's in a war. What do you need 100 shots for? Like the kid that was 10 years old, I asked him, I said, why are you in here? Because he wasn't no man. He was so little.
Right.
And he said, I was carrying a gun. So I said, well, why were you carrying a gun? He said, my neighborhood, you got to carry a gun.
Okay.
I said, well, when I was 10 years old, the only thing I carried was a book, a basketball, a baseball mitt, or a football.
Right.
You know, that's all I carried when I was 10 years old, you know. But he seemed to think that he had to have a gun at 10 years old.
You know, I hear a lot of that, too. This is Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison, and my special guest, for those who may be joining us now, is Darryl Jones. He is a 10-point OG. He's been with 10 Point for about 15 years, been on the street, dealing with at-risk adolescents, at-risk youth, and at-risk young adults. So, Darryl, you are hearing a lot of young people who say they're carrying because it's their form of protection, because other people are carrying.
Scared.
Yeah, and they're scared.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we see a lot of that. One of the criticisms is, and certainly I have been in the midst of controversy, is the whole issue of black-on-black violence. And it doesn't seem to be something that we want to talk about in the black community, but in Indianapolis, normally 7 out of 10 homicides, the victim is black, and normally the suspect is black. Mm-hmm. So disproportionately, we're being impacted greater than any other ethnic group in Indianapolis, and then nationally too. Mm-hmm. We're about 12-13% of the national population, but we're about 50% of homicide victims in America or more. Mm-hmm. Homicide now is the leading cause of death for black males, for those who are listening, between the ages of 1 year old now and 44. It used to not be that high. Is it an issue that you hear people talking about on the streets, in the barbershop, this whole issue of black-on-black violence, or have we become numb to it now?
I think for a minute we were numb. I think people are starting to speak up now. I think people are starting to recognize now, because it's starting to hit home in a lot of areas, because it's so much.
Right.
It's so much going on that it's touching a little bit of everybody. So I think people are starting. That's like I was at my other job yesterday, and we were talking about it, and they were asking me my opinion about what was going on and what needs to be done. But the question to me is, I mean, okay, now they're saying you don't have to have a gun permit. Now, we killing each other as it is.
Right.
When I was coming up, there's no way possible you could have got a gun permit at 18 years old.
Right.
You know, you had to have a business.
Right.
You had to be handling money to have a gun.
Right.
Well, now they're saying you don't even have to have a gun permit. But at the same time, they're saying marijuana is illegal.
Right.
Well, now, marijuana ain't never killed nobody that I know of.
Right.
You know, but guns do. They say guns don't kill, people do. Okay, but if they don't have the gun, they can't kill.
Right.
Right? You know, so we was talking about that today, and that was my point. I mean, why are we worried about not letting marijuana be legal? Not that I'm trying to boast marijuana to be legal.
Right.
I'm just showing you the differences in what's being taken place and to try to stop what's going on. To me, it don't appear to be they really worried about what's going on, because now you got it where anybody can go get a gun.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you see that more, you know, than I have in the past, and the number of females that are now carrying guns now. Yeah, you know, that has dramatically increased over the years.
And they about as worse as the men.
Yeah.
They're shooting the guns too.
Yeah, that's true.
A lot of people don't know, but I know from being in the streets, they're doing a lot of this shooting that's going on too.
Well, in the streets, you know, we have been at homicide scenes, we have been at shooting scenes. I have noticed that there have been young men who y'all have worked with over the years, who seem to have turned their life around. Some of them I see in the streets now, and they say, "Hey, Reverend Harrison, remember me? I used to come and play basketball in the gym," and they've kind of turned their life around, and I think, you and Mario and Anthony and others, had a lot to do with that.
Well, we gave them a purpose, Pastor. Everybody needs a purpose. Everybody wants a dream. Everybody has a dream. Everybody wants, they need a purpose. Like I was saying earlier, where a kid he's sitting there and there's nothing for him to do. I mean, he don't have no purpose. He don't have no goals to set or no goals set for him, from his parents.
Okay.
He's not going to school. He's not trying to do anything prosperous or to better himself because he don't know how. And when if somebody takes time out to teach them how, keep these kids busy.
Right.
Keep them out of the street. Keep them in something. And say you got a son. You're gonna play football. Well, he don't like football. Well, try baseball.
Right.
He don't like baseball. He wants to be in the band. Well, let him be in the band.
Right.
But give him something that he likes to do.
Right.
So that he can continue to do it, because that's all of us know that. Even like your job, if you don't like your job, it's kind of hard.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? You kind of have to like your job, or how much you're getting paid. You got to like something about it. You got to like something about it in order to keep going.
Right.
So these kids need a purpose. We gave them a purpose.
Right.
In the gym, they had a purpose. They felt worthy.
Right.
We win a game. One kid, you hit the winning shot. He's lifted up. He wants to do, good things. Now, I went the winning shot. I can play. I can do this. And they come to the gym every day instead of
so how'd y'all get them? I know y'all have gotten some in school, some jobs. What was the process that led to that? Where your conversation with them changed a little bit?
Well, I told them a lot about myself.
Okay.
You know what I mean? We may talk about a lot what's going on in the streets or in the city or wherever. Like I said, everybody's different though. Everybody has different needs.
Okay.
And we'll talk about what their need is. And I'll explain to them if there was a part of my life, I explain to them what I done.
Right.
Or I might explain, well, Reverend Harrison, go talk to him.
Right.
Right. It just depends. It depends on what the situation is and what the need is for me.
Okay.
But I can say this: we had 12 kids that we started off with from the 6th grade. Only 2 of them has been in trouble. The rest of them went to college, or they got jobs now.
Wow.
We had 10 out of 12 to turn their life around.
Well, that's a good statistic. Yeah,
that's a good statistic. Yeah. And what's funny about it, when you're out here helping these kids and your heart's into it, you don't really notice that kind of stuff.
Right.
And a couple of parents and grandparents then came to me and said, what you really did, you turned my son around. He's doing this, he's doing that. He went to college. We really appreciate that.
I don't know if you remember this. You was telling me a story one night where someone had got, I think, shot in the hand, and you were up at the service station. I don't know if you remember that story. And they came to talk to you about being shot, and you kind of prevented.
Yep.
You remember that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
He got shot up at the gas station.
Okay.
And he was telling me about he was going to do this and he was going to do that.
Right.
And we sat down and talked, and I explained to him, you could do all that.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because that's your choice.
So he wanted to retaliate.
He wanted to retaliate.
Okay.
And I was telling you can do all that because that's your choice. I said,
right.
But this is what's going to happen.
Right.
If you do this.
Right.
And we went through the scenarios of what can happen. And because my thing is, when I talk to the kids, they'll say, well, I'll this and that and this and this. And when you're a kid, you focused on what you want to be focused on.
Right.
You don't look at the book all the way through.
Okay.
You just look at where it looks good for you.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So it'll look good for me if I go retaliate.
Right.
But that's not the end of it.
Right.
Either his family may come back and retaliate, or you may get caught, go to prison for the rest of your life. He had just had a baby.
Okay.
I said, you got to consider your child. You got to consider your female friend that you so in love with, if that be the case. You got to consider your parents, especially if you got parents that's trying to do the right thing for you.
Right.
I mean, there's other scenarios to just retaliate.
Right.
And that's what we went through. And once we got through, he kind of, he didn't retaliate.
He didn't retaliate. Darryl,
he's working now.
A lot of people don't see the value of y'all's presence on the street, and I know. Part of what you were sharing earlier is that, most of these kids may see the drug dealer who dresses nice and drives a nice car. So that becomes kind of the role model or what they want to become. But it seems like to me, y'all provide an alternative to that when you're out on the street, kind of engaging the young people who may see the glamour in that, but they don't also see the dangers and what could happen trying to live that kind of life.
They don't read the book all the way through.
Yeah,
they just stop at the good part.
Right.
You know,
right.
I got a brand new car, and I got, I'm dressed.
Right.
They don't go to the fact that, okay, you seen Billy down the street, Billy Bob down the street. He was selling drugs. He was doing this. He was doing that. But where's Billy Bob at now?
Right.
See, they don't go that far. They want to stop where the glamour is, where it looks good. That they don't want to read the book all the way through. And a lot of people would ask me this: why come kids come and talk to you? Well, my answer is, if you was in school and you had a science project,
right,
you wouldn't go talk to the English teacher.
Right.
You go talk to the science teacher. Right. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So they come and talk to us OGs because they know or then heard that we been down the road that they down. They going down.
Right. How many parents and grandparents and cousins and uncles did you grow up with that these kids are related to? That's another avenue. Yeah.
I probably couldn't tell you how many. I mean, Indianapolis is very small.
Right.
It seems like some kind of way all of us blacks are connected.
Right.
Some kind of way we're connected. And sure, I see a lot of kids that I grew up with their parents, their grandparents,
Right.
And I kind of had a little reputation when I was in the streets,
Right.
and I grew up in the area that I work in, so it makes it a little bit easier for me because they didn't say, well, who is he, where he come from, does he really know what he's talking about, these type of things they didn't already heard about. So a lot of kids come to me, hey, man, I need to talk.
Right.
We even had one kid to come. He was on drugs.
Right.
Brought him to church. But we got him some money together. Took him to Harbor Light.
Right.
Yeah, so a lot of them come because they know I'm genuine. Kids don't. If you talking to these kids, and it sounds like you done read this in a book, they can recognize.
They can recognize that.
Yeah, they can recognize if it's from your heart or if you're just doing it because it's your job.
Right.
We had a guy ride off in Mario's car at the church.
Right.
And I got very angry. Since we're keeping it real, I got very angry. And I jumped in the car, went around there where he was at, and I jumped out, and I'm ready to really fight.
Right.
Because I'm really upset because, you come up to the gym, we got opening this for you guys, and y'all come up here and steal. So they was standing. I said, y'all took his car, and they was denying it, of course.
Right.
I said, but what really got me was, I said, we don't get paid to open that gym. We open that gym for you guys.
Right.
So y'all can have somewhere to go.
Right.
And have something to do.
Right.
You know what I mean? And not get in trouble.
Right.
And the guy that I guess was their leader said, what you just say? And I told him, repeated what I said again. And his exact words was, it won't happen again. And it hasn't, has it, Pat?
No, it hasn't. It hasn't. Y'all's relationship, because we had, I remember we had a couple cars stole at the church parking lot, Mario's and Lloyd's.
And Lloyd's.
And Lloyd's, yeah. We ended up getting that car back too because of the connections in the streets.
He said, "Will, you won't have to worry about that again." And we haven't had that problem again. But my point with saying that was not to glorify myself or anything like that. Was to say that they respected the fact that we wasn't getting paid, because they were thinking that it was just a job for us to do.
Right.
So when he realized that we were doing it out of the kindness, of our heart, that we was doing it for them, for real, genuinely, they stopped doing it. They didn't come up here and steal no more.
This is Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison, and my special guest today is Darryl Jones, who is one of the 10-point OGs. He's been with Indy 10 Point for about 15 years now. He works in the 29th and MLK area. UNWA is what we call it, and just one of the exceptional OGs on the ground. Is this a model, and we know the city has certainly gone to something similar to what we are doing, where you're putting people on the streets who may be from that neighborhood as a means to try to reach the kids who may be in gangs, who may be vulnerable to be influenced to go down the right path? Do we need to do more of this and expand this kind of effort?
I believe so. See, here it is. OGs. Okay, let's get the OG word right. Okay, everybody call it old gangsters, OG, whatever.
Okay.
We call it, the OGs that I deal with call it the order of God.
Okay.
But now, the youngsters know if you're real, just because you went to prison don't make you an OG.
Okay.
You know, we got some guys run to, I'm an OG because they went to prison.
Well, a lot of them do say that.
Yeah, but that don't make them an OG.
That don't make them OG.
An OG
okay.
is a person that could survive in the streets.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? You know, and because you went to prison one time, got out, you straighten your life out, you're not an OG.
Okay.
You know, you wasn't involved long enough.
Okay.
And a lot of these kids know.
Right.
They know by how you talk.
Right.
What you say.
Right.
If you really were in the streets,
right,
you know, and if you get some OGs out in the neighborhood where they grew up in, then they'll probably have a little extra help like I did because they already have a reputation,
right?
You know, so they're not questioning if you know what you're talking about,
right?
Or not. They know you do because they heard about you,
right?
Or when they talking to you, they can tell if you know what you're talking about or not.
Right,
you know?
right.
Whether they listen or not, some do, some don't. Some don't care what you say.
Is it also a term of respect? You know, and I say that because, you know, as I started walking more, and I've been walking more and more, you know, the last few years. I was out with Anthony them, and some young guys come up to me and said, "What's up, OG?" And
it is a form of respect. That is a form of respect.
Yeah.
That is. They feel like you made it.
Right,
you know,
right.
He made it through there. You
right,
know?
right.
And some of them will take that and run with it. If he can make it, I can make it.
Right.
So some of them will take it and try to continue to run with it. He made it, I'll make it too.
Right.
But some of them will listen
and
say, well, now if he went through it, I don't want to go through all that.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
You know, so we have some, that's the ones that we reach. The ones that don't want to go through it, what we went through, you know, or what whoever the OG is went through and tell them about what they went through. Some of the kids be like, really? You know what I mean? Because a lot of these kids some of these kids out here doing stuff and don't even know how much time they can get.
Right.
They just doing stuff.
Right.
You know, they not research. When I was coming, we researched. That's why I was going in and out. I wasn't doing no class A's or no, which were, you know, high profile crimes. I wouldn't do that.
You know, I went to visit a young person in prison, or I encountered him visiting someone else. And the sad thing about the story was that he had committed several gun crimes as a juvenile, and he always got off and got out. Mm-hmm. He committed a gun crime at the age of 18. He was almost 19 at the time. He ended up killing someone, and he's now serving life in prison. And one of the comments he made to me was he didn't realize that once he turned 18, the game changed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
the game changed.
They just doing stuff because you know, you might a lot of it's peer pressure.
Right.
You know, I come up to you, man, we just hit a lick, and you know they call it licks or whatever.
Right.
We just hit a lick for this and that. You know, well, when y'all going again? Well, we going tomorrow. Whenever again, they go with them.
Right.
Not realizing that if they get, you know, like I would ask the kids in juvenile, okay, if you got out and somebody came right up to you right now and said it's a guy down the street with $10,000 in his house, let's go take it, and you say yeah, okay, but how do you know that that's how it's going to be?
Right.
You know,
right.
They have to read the book all the way through.
Right.
You know what I mean? You know, you might go in there, he might give you the $10,000, he might not.
Right.
You know what I mean? He might say, I ain't give you nothing. Reach for a gun, now you got to shoot him, or he shoots you.
Right.
You didn't turn this into a whole different thing.
Right. That's true.
You know? So they got to understand what they're doing. A lot of them don't even know what they're doing. They try to make like this ain't no game out here. You know, I hear some of these kids, ain't no game out here. Put your hands on me, I'm a kid, you know, all this kind of stuff. You know what I mean? You know, but what are you getting out of it? What, you know, this my question is asking them, so what do you get out of it? You kill me.
Right.
You know what I mean? What you don't understand is we do have a God.
Right.
And you will pay for that.
Right.
You know, and a lot of these kids don't understand. They don't understand if they're might not be able to sleep at night.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? You know, they may not tell you.
Right.
But I'm sure I done ran into a lot of them that cry in their cells at night.
Right.
You know what I mean? Now you're looking at, they telling you ain't gonna never go back to the streets no more. You're not going back to the streets. Now you don't understand how you got in this situation. It don't take but a couple of minutes to get in trouble, but it can take you your lifetime to get out of it.
Yeah, this is real talk. That's real talk. That's real talk on the streets to youngsters. Thank you so much, Darryl, for joining me today.
Allowing me to do this.
Yeah, on my podcast, Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison. I'm Reverend Charles Harrison, and this has been Real Talk. Join me next time as I bring more real talk about the real issues that affect our communities here in Indianapolis and across the country. Be sure to follow and subscribe to this podcast and share it on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you so much for joining me again. on Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison, and I pray that you have a blessed and wonderful day.
This is Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast.
And be sure to check out other great podcasts on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Online now at allindianapodcast.com.